Hey everybody, we're at the Imp and the Ogre. My name's Paul.
This is Ryan.
Today we are jumping over to Lamentations of a Flame Princess and tackling The God That Crawls.
Yeah, so The God That Crawls is written by James Raggi, the creator of Lamentation of the Flame Princess. This was originally published in 2012. For those of you who don't know, Lamentation of the Flame Princess is a retro clone. It's basically a first edition D&D modernization, cloning of it, same type of feel. It's part of the OSR, Old School Revival. I don't know what the adjective I'm looking for there. Thingy. So it's designed as a low-level adventure. You can pick this one up on Drive-Thru RPG if you are interested in checking it out for yourself. The synopsis is actually super straightforward. The PCs get trapped in a tomb with an unkillable monster, and they must evade it and escape before they get eaten or run out of resources, effectively.
Mm-hmm. So setting swap as well. This is set with a background of Christianity. It's set in 1600 AD, so you're playing in that world of...
That's the way it's written.
Yep.
Basically, it can be run in anything. The default is set... you wrote it as it was part of the real world. So it's set in England. It's set in medieval England and sort of an alternative... Christian belief system, if you will.
Easily switched to anything else, though. Just it's a famous religious or person was corrupted effectively and turned into this god that crawls, and the whole society of church and whatever it is has been hiding this secret with the help of state as well for many years, and it's kind of been forgotten along the way. But easily transferable, and I would probably shift it to something else.
Oh, you can just make it literally anything. It doesn't have to have any religious connotations whatsoever. Like, the PCs never actually find out where this monster comes from.
Yeah.
Like, they don't learn any of this history. All of the history is there mostly just for the DM's interest while they're reading it. Basically, as far as the PCs ever know, is there's a church that's over some ruins, and I guess they kind of can learn in a roundabout way that they worship, protect this creature that's in it, but it doesn't have to have any actual connection to a real religious organization, or it could just be a front of any organization that you use in your campaign. Like, it doesn't actually have to be a church. It just has to be some sort of organization. This could easily fit in a mercantile house or a keep or anything like that. You just need some sort of group that's been a caretaker for this thing, if you will. So it really fits anywhere. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty details, I did kind of like that this adventure comes with a preamble to talk about basically the design philosophy to a certain extent of the creator. And, it's just a page of expectations and design insights and whatnot. But what I did like in the preamble was that in at least this setting, adventurer is defined as one who looks for trouble, and adventurer is defined that the trouble an adventurer finds.
Yeah.
And I really like that as kind of an ethos for adventure design, right? And it's sort of implied and discussed a little bit in this that an adventurer in most settings is kind of a degenerate, right? Like, why are you going and looking for trouble? Well, you're looking for trouble because that's where you find money. Right. If you wanted safe, get a real job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was mostly the preambles there to explain why it's kind of deadly and dangerous and unbalanced to a certain extent. And the logic behind that is, well, if you're going to be rooting around in forbidden tombs looking for valuables that you can hawk, that's dangerous and stupid, and that's why most people don't do this, right? And I kind of want to talk about that a little bit, because I find that in D&D in general, and I won't even say this is more of a thing that, I normally just complain 5th edition wrecked everything. No, it's not, I don't think this is a 5th edition thing, is that adventurer seems to be part of the natural ecology of the campaign setting. That like it's a legitimate job to a certain extent. That like it's a normal thing to put up a sign on a outside an inn or a tavern that says "Adventurers Wanted," with the expectation that there'll just be adventurers wandering by. Mm-hmm. That there's all these out of work adventurers looking for like it's a legitimate thing. You're always seeing in adventures that people in power, I keep saying but let's just say people in power for whatever reason, kings and etc. Like legitimate, influential people that have accesses to resources and troops and followers routinely seek out adventurers to deal with problems, right? Like small mercenary companies and mercenary individuals is the norm in most settings. And I think that's a little weird to a certain extent. And I kind of like this push that people that are adventurers are not the norm. These are not healthy, well-adjusted individuals. Because if you were, you'd be a cobbler, or you'd just be like, I'm a farmer. That's what you do. Like, I'm a peasant. My dad was a peasant. My grandpa was a peasant. My kid will be a peasant, right? Yeah. Like, you need to have either a certain level of desperation, right? Like, you're dirt poor and you're willing to do anything to get ahead. Like, that's what's going to motivate you to crawl in that hole and hope not to die. Or you're just completely bonkers,
fair enough,
to go and do it. And I like that idea. And this is something I've heard a couple of times mentioned by Matt Covell, that the rat catcher mentality, that adventurers don't get any respect because they're not respectable members of society, right? And the idea as a reward for adventuring could simply be some acquiring of legitimacy.
Right.
And in older editions particularly, like when you reach a certain level, you got things. You got a keep. You might get a title. You get a wizard, and you build up that level of respectability from murder hobo to legitimate member of society, if you will. And I kind of miss that progression that was sort of lost somewhere in the last 40 years of role-playing games.
How else would the down on his luck thief become a member of society aside from gaining fame by doing feats of whatever?
Right. Yeah. These are desperate individuals or legitimately crazy individuals, right? Like you have to have some reason in there or heavily motivated, right? Indiana Jones did this and he wasn't crazy, but like he was incredibly passionate.
He's an archaeologist, man.
It belongs in a museum, right? Exactly. Like you had that passion to go in there. And I think that gets lost a little bit as to, you're a fighter. Awesome. Why aren't you working for a noble guarding him? Like why aren't you in the army? Why aren't you working for a merchant caravan as a guard? Why are you not doing that? Well, because the pay isn't that great.
Right.
Right. So by design, adventurers are people that don't like to follow rules and want to, willing to risk their lives for huge amounts of money.
Yeah, I've not really given it too much thought.
No, and
to be honest, I think it's like, it's a good point. It's a really good point. Like, why would that fighter not be in the army?
Right? Did he get kicked out for insubordination? Like, I think
was he looting too much, or did he kill innocents and he got dishonorably discharged? And now what's he going to do?
And that's what I liked about this preamble, because it got me to think about this type of stuff more so than the occasional drift through your brain aspect of it. Is adventurers all have skills, right? Some very specialized skills. Why aren't they working in a legitimate capacity, right? And for some, it's easier than others. Maybe you're a paladin and your holy mission is to eradicate evil undead, right? Yeah. That gives you a good reason to dig into holes and whatnot, right? But you need to have a good reason to not just be the court wizard of Duke so-and-so and spend your days in the lap of luxury instead of out in the misery and maybe dying from a stray arrow, right? Like, I think it's something that's not necessarily built enough into sort of character backgrounds and character design, like, because there's the expectation that a career day, getting adventurer on your, form at the end is a legitimate job choice at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right. So
we've talked about before how I think background is probably the most important thing in motivation. And this just like ties perfectly into that. Like, why would I go into that cave? Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's put forward enough as sort of a core aspect of character creation. That, like, why are you actually doing this? Right? Yeah, we definitely mentioned this before, that, like, there needs to be a reason why you're not stopping adventuring.
Yeah.
Right? And as this mostly comes up when you get past a certain point. You have a ton of money. Why are you still going out?
And, like, power relatively to the general population.
Yes.
Like, a fourth level spellcaster would be, like, divine compared to peasants, just about,
You can literally bring back the dead.
Yeah.
Why are you mucking about in a tomb, right? So I think stakes need to change as you go along to keep people motivated, like keep the characters motivated. Like the players always just want to play, right? Like, why are you doing this? Because I want to, right? Like, because I'm not playing Farm Simulator, I'm playing, D&D.
Yeah.
But from a character standpoint, I don't necessarily feel that there's always enough motivation because money doesn't really matter as much as it used to.
It'd be cool if a background for, I don't know, say a cleric, if you were like a down on your luck person and then your gifts were bestowed upon you by a deity to serve some purpose for them. And if you didn't continue to do it, they would strip you of their gift.
No, I completely agree. I think... my sort of philosophy on divine magic is that it's patron magic. It's a tit for tat type of transactional agreement. You don't just get the powers because,
like, leveling up would be a negotiation with your deity. If you want these more powers,
you need to do this.
You need to go do this task for me.
You spend 3 hours on the soapbox every single year. Or there should be some sort of requirement for thing. I mean, it effectively should just be no different than a Warlock's Pact, is that to get access to the power, that you should have to do something.
I always liked with Warlocks, they're like direct interaction with the thing that gives them power. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's why in my setting, and I stole this from other people's settings, it's not like I came up with it. I like the idea of saints. I like there being like a hierarchy of power givers. That you're not actually directly interacting with, an uber god. You're interacting...
Ayun, or whoever.
Or what's a Maliki or what have you, right? You're not interacting with them. Like in mine, I have a hierarchy. I got the god, and then there's heralds, and below heralds, there's prophets, and below prophets, there are saints. So everybody starts off with saints, and then as you gain power, you attract the attention of the more powerful divine units, and that's where the divine power comes from. I also like the idea, this is completely against anything, this is homebrew junk, but maybe people find it interesting, is that clerics are special in that they have the ability to channel divine energy, and I like the idea that that's a special thing. So certain people have the capacity to become reservoirs of divine magic, which means that there's a premium on them. So different saints might be motivated to sort of convert. Like there's a negotiation, bargaining aspect, because like if
different cuts of a gem.
Yeah. But I mean, I like the idea that there's the giving back. Like there's a reason why divine actors want clergy, right? And in my brain, it's for faith. And to get faith, you want your clerics or whatever out there doing acts in your name and recruiting people. And if there's a limited number of people that can do that, you're going to be trying to steal clergy from other
your contract's coming up and people are putting in bids.
Exactly. Or you reach a certain power level. Maybe someone from another pantheon's like, you've been doing really good for like
we've been watching you through your rookie years.
Yeah, exactly. We'd like to invite you over to the big leagues.
Yeah. Come play for the Yankees.
Exactly.
This is minor stuff you're dealing with over here.
I know Oakland's organization's been really good for you, but you've reached the point that you're ready for a bigger stage, right? Like you can, I like that kind of idea where there's that greater negotiation aspect of it. I also like it being a good reason why there's a motivation for religious warfare, if you will, in that if you're killing of your rival, they're losing access to that mana or whatever you want to think about it, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of like that.
Doesn't that make you evil?
Well, yeah. But anyways, we're super in the weeds here. To get back to the actual adventure, I just thought that was a really interesting framework of way of thinking about adventuring in general, and what should an adventure be, right? Like an adventure should be a scary, dangerous place because it should be somewhere normal people aren't going to be willing to go.
Right.
Or that normal people that have gone into it died. That's why there's still treasure there. So it needs to be dangerous by default.
Yep.
And this place, this
is dangerous.
Is dangerous. This tomb or whatever is super dangerous.
So after all of that, the hook is just basically as written up for whatever reason why the PCs are there, and all they need to know is that there's a hill in the door, and rumors hill or in the hill.
I don't think they're supposed to know about the door in the hill, because I think that's the way they get out.
Okay, well, right? They need to know there's a church.
You just need to you need to put a hole in the path of the PCs. Before we get into the nitty-gritty details, to actually mention, before I went in the weeds, there was a couple things I wanted to point out about this adventure in general. It definitely is not going to be for all groups, because there's literally one monster in it, and it's unkillable, and some groups are not going to find that fun, right? Like it's definitely designed to be claustrophobic and confusing and frustrating to a certain level, and not everyone's going to enjoy that. The other thing I made special note of is, especially since so many people play with discs or play online, like making maps available to players is pretty common oftentimes. And reading this, I sort of made note that if I'm running this adventure, I'm not doing the mapping for my players, because part of what makes this adventure work is the layout of the dungeon is entirely confusing by design.
It's a maze, right? You're supposed to be in a maze.
Yeah, there's ladders up, there's ladders down, there's multiple levels. They move between multiple levels in different places.
Yep.
It's designed to be confusing, and if they have a map on, Roll20 that they can annotate as they go along. No, I think this is a situation where you tell your players that they're expected to make their own map, and hopefully it's accurate. And that's why when I'm using situations without mapping, I don't say you turn left or turn right. I'll be nice. I'll say there's a opening to the north or to the west or whatever. So it's always in the same orientation. You don't have the players turning themselves around because you said to your left and then to your right and to your left, because your lefts and your rights change. So I'd be nice enough to tell them the cardinal direction, but I think it works better if people can actually get lost and have to backtrack and be like, wait, we've been here before, right? Like if you have a good map that they didn't make themselves, then that's not an issue, because they'll always know where they are relative to where they've been.
Fair enough.
And I think part of the fun, I'll use fun in air quotes in this adventure, is to try to navigate this confusing, pile of tunnels and rooms. Anyways. So the hook, back to the hook, sorry. The hole in the ground.
That's it. That's all. There's a hole in the ground. Yeah. In the church.
So as presented, there's a church in the back of which there's a hole, and you're supposed to get the players into the hole. without letting the players know that they're supposed to get into the hole.
Yeah, and if you go and you say, "What's that for?" He'll go, "I don't know. You want to go look?" You know, like,
well, the players should never stumble upon it, right? That's the whole thing. Is it's hidden, so you kind of got to give the players a reason to find it. In general, like, why should they be looking in the back room in a church?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I guess, yeah.
So I was actually thinking of running this in my campaign. It was one of the threads that the party could have followed. Mm-hmm. And the hook that I had was that one of the PCs was actually looking for a missing person. Mm-hmm. And the missing person, I can't remember, is a minor noble, third son or something like that in the clergy. And he was trying to find this person. And this person was an amateur historian and was going from church to church studying things, right? So the hook would have been, is the whatchamahoos, the trail will lead to the church that has the hole in it, and that's where it ends.
Right.
So the person, for whatever reason, found the hole. But there needs to be something, I think, suspicious enough or interesting enough about this church to force the players to press a little harder. Mm-hmm. Because none of the people are evil, right? Like, that's the whole thing. These aren't bad people. They're not cultists. They're not trying to kill the PCs.
They just have a secret.
But they're going to protect their secret and the creature that lives in the pit. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, if the PCs find out about the pit, they're going in one way or the other.
Yeah. So either they go in willingly or they're drugged. Yeah, the PCs drug them and they'll wake up in the bottom of the pit. I prefer the, hopefully they go in willingly technique. Yeah. Because then you can narrate the priest or whoever it is cutting the ropes and kind of just saying sorry, and then them having no way out but to explore.
Yeah. So there's a couple points about that I was concerned about. One of which is it is a little railroady once the PCs know there's a pit. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of resources that are given to the DM to basically force the players down there. So the drugging is part of it. If they leave the area, the priest calls in a favor with the local militia, and they you could have the whole area up in arms trying to track you down. And once again, these are all good people, not evil.
Yeah.
Good people. So
the state asks no questions in this sense because of an accord written.
There are just some favors and blah, 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 right? So it kind of puts your players in a difficult situation. Once again, most of the time players are going to heed the call to adventure.
Yeah. There's treasure in the hole.
Yeah. That being said, the players might ignore the hook altogether, never find the pit, and then move on. This is one of those adventures that it's either it happens or it doesn't, right? You can't overplay your hands, because if you make, say, the church seem too suspicious, or the leader seem evil, or any of the townsfolk seem evil, that doesn't really fit what this is about, right? These aren't bad people. I guess they're not super good, they do feed people to a monster, but they're not evil by themselves. One thing I did like about getting the PCs into the pit is that certain townsfolk will volunteer to help guide them as martyrs, effectively. They're willing to go down there to die, and when they're down there, they'll just pray the entire time to lure the evil god.
Yeah, they'll make noise. Yeah,
to eat them. And once again, they go down there to serve as live bait sacrifices.
I think they suggest no, you go first, all the time too. I'll stay in the back, you go first. Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. The one thing about the pit that I was a bit concerned about, and I've never actually had to run an encounter where people were trying to climb up a wall, where there was tons of people with spears and arrows trying to stop them from climbing up the wall. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the only issue I wasn't sure about. How is it to keep somebody from climbing? I think it's only 20 feet, right? Climbing up this wall, right? I don't know. Again, this is designed for low-level PCs, so you don't have a lot of hit points at level 1. So it should be easy to dissuade. You get stabbed with a spear once, like it's half your hit points sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So that was the only concern I had. If you play it right, the PC shouldn't know that it's a trap until it's like too late.
Mm-hmm.
I also thought it might be interesting if there was a lid that could be used. Right? So like once the PCs are gone and they pull up the rope or whatever, like they can put a lid on top of it so you can't come out that way again. But I don't know absolutely about that. Because there's 3 entrances to this. There's the door you mentioned previously. There's this hole as well, effectively. And then there's a secret ladder that leads to a storeroom in the church. There's actually 2 entrances in the church, one of which has been lost to time, effectively, and it's under some crates in a storeroom. So the likelihood of the PCs actually finding that one is pretty low, but it is an option depending on searching for secrets and perception checks and stuff like that. But basically, it's all about getting the PCs into this dungeon and then them trying to find the other end of it without getting killed by the god that crawls.
Blob.
And the god is basically a giant amoeba.
Yep.
The way I described it is functionally immortal. Like you can actually, you can kill it, but it has permanent regeneration. So it keeps coming back. And what I liked about just the design of the monster is that it becomes stronger by absorbing PCs.
Yeah.
So when it dissolves characters that have class levels, it gains more hit dice. It also gains abilities and stuff because it'll absorb magic items.
Yeah.
So it'll destroy your magic items if you have any magic items. And I thought just in general as a monster design, it's kind of interesting that it gets you can continually get stronger over time. And I think it would be kind of interesting to have maybe not like a mindless amoeba, but if you had some sort of, say, demonic monster that was of this type of power level gaining, you could actually use it multiple times in a campaign with a good explanation of why it keeps getting stronger, or as a punishment, quote unquote, for PCs that maybe ignore a threat early on. Right? And then over time it becomes, it's just a cute little amoeba-y thing. It never hurt nobody, and then it's like the blob, right? The blob comes out of the asteroid. It's super tiny. Like, it's a little slime. It's not hurting anybody. And then it's taken over the entire town. Like, I like that kind of idea of having a good reason for a creature to grow organically in power level to either be a recurring type of villain or as sort of a punishment might not be the right word to use there.
It's a good way to like keep the world alive as well, though, too, right? Like the progression of time exists beyond what you're doing at this moment as well.
Yeah, I just like the idea of there being consequences for PCs making decisions. Right? So this might be kind of like this type of monster is potentially a way of illustrating that, where you can't do both things. You pick one, and you pick the one that seems like the more serious threat.
Yep.
Right? And what is the consequence of that? Well, this thing's been in the sewers eating more stuff, and now it's bigger and scarier and coming out of people's privies, right?
Yep.
Like you can, grabbing people out of their bathtubs and whatnot. So I like that mechanic, and I might steal it for things. I just thought it was kind of a neat way of handling stuff.
I agree.
So, the other thing I wanted to mention before we get into the details of the underground part, sorry to cut you off, was the adventure again presents this basically as a chase. Like the entire thing is basically a chase. And I did appreciate that the author presented a couple of different ways of tracking the chase. Right? Like there's the way where you track the position of everything all the time, and no. Boo to that.
Yeah.
And then presented some just simple rules on the chance for the creature to show up under conditions.
Yeah, in certain areas, yeah.
So finding magic items, certain specific encounters in the dungeon itself increase the noise effectively and increase the likelihood of there being the monster. I liked it that way. As a bookkeeping, a lot easier. There's just sort of this chance that they can show up, and then you deal with the immediate consequence of that. You allow the PCs to lose the creature, run blindly enough through it.
Yeah, I like the noise mechanic better. Yeah.
Yeah, just from a bookkeeping standpoint. And I'm always about how does this make my life easier or my life harder? And my life running the game easier, I'm always hugely in favor of. So I did appreciate that. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention about the church, sorry, I keep cutting off, is I felt that I don't know how you felt about this, but I felt the church was entirely overly described for its role in this adventure. And normally I'm super pro that, a first edition adventure. I'm just like, oh yeah, we know exactly how many gold pieces are under the floorboards of the blacksmith, right?
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I just found it to be a bit much. In particular, there's 2 pages of the adventure that is just a list of, what was it? Permits. So it's the church permits. Who are they given by? Which ones are in Latin and which ones are in English? So it's just like a list of like kings and popes effectively for 2 pages.
Yeah, I think I just
I
just flip.
But it was very much like, why is this there? And then there was another bit too that I thought was super odd. There's a room with a bunch of paintings, and then there's a little description from what happens if you talk to the priest about that painting, his description of the painting. And I'm like, why? Like,
just in case.
Yeah, I don't know. I just felt weird to me, which is odd because normally I'm all for ridiculous detail. Yeah. So it felt excessive. Anyways, I just a general complaint about that one particular thing for whatever reason. All right. The dungeon. I'll let you
there's a lot of great things about the dungeon, I think. I don't like this adventure because it flips into the realm of reality.
Breaks the fourth wall.
Yeah, and you're tracking things based off of what your players' actions are, what they're doing, or how they're reacting to situations, and then that has in-game consequences. And there's,
in all fairness, that's one situation and is completely optional, but I agree that it definitely put me off.
But there's not. Okay, so one of the things that they can run into is the mother's curses was one of the things that you can get. There's these 3 statues.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I think it's a great thing that, if you handle these, there's 3 dolls that are in prison cells. If they're touched, they each give you a different effect. So one of them, unable to take actions without unanimous support from all others.
It's awesome.
I mean, that's all right.
You need permission. You have to say, basically, can I attack?
Mother, may I?
Yeah.
And then this is where it started to go downhill. Is you have to track what the player says out of character, and that they have to remember everybody's name. And if they don't, you can that just doesn't make sense to me, right? So if you're a player, you have to just remember everybody's name in
Mother
game. Forget
me not. The PC and player cannot forget any NPC names. If they do, they lose a point of constitution. Super punitive, I agree. But it just forces your players to make notes. Now, how often would this actually come up? Not that frequently.
I don't know. Well, and then the third one, too, is you roll to see if you override choices that PCs are making.
Yeah. Mother knows best. So the last curse there is 3 times per session. So basically 3 times per sitting down at the table together, the DM can try to override a PC's action. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that it always is for the worse, right? You can just change the action to stop your players from doing something dumb.
Yeah.
Right. But it's a 1 in 6 chance, and the 3rd time is always a success. So at least once per game, the DM gets to change a PC's action, which, it takes away player agency. Boo. That being said, these are all curses. They're not permanent. Right. So I think I made a note Let me see. Yeah, I made a note about a lot of the arbitrariness of some of the rules that are included in this, and that it might be frustrating to certain people because like none of this is actually by a particular rule.
Yeah.
This is very much the rule of cool. That's why it happens.
Yeah. And I mean, like, maybe I would actually enjoy doing this. I don't know. It just seems ridiculous from a point of reading it. You know, maybe it would be very fun at a table with people that have sort of this like outlandish adventure that is crossing into different, you know, the barrier of fantasy and like actually being more engaging with people and what we're doing in real life. Like maybe that would be fun.
Well, I mean, when it comes to curses, I like really punitive curses, right? Why? Right. Well, most curses are kind of like, oh, you get a -1 to your attack rolls. Mm-hmm. Yay. Right.
Yeah.
Like, whereas this type of curse, it's super obnoxious, but not really that bad under most situations. Right. And there's good reason for it, because this ties into what we were talking about at the beginning. This place is full of dangerous things, right? These aren't gold statues. They're weird, creepy little statues that are locked in a jail cell.
Yeah.
To get the curse, a PC needs to unlock the jail cell and then pick up the creepy doll. I'm okay with them having a consequence to picking up a creepy doll. Especially if you say, for example, let them know that it's magical or give them some hint, or you let them have a saving throw, right? But you can give off hints that these are not okay, right? Something you say is like, for 1 foot around all of the statues is a carpet of dead insects. To me, that says no touchy, right? Like,
yeah, it's killing things around it. Sure.
Right. Like you can just make it obvious. And I kind of like the idea, and this is a Lamentations of the Flame Princess sort of stylistic thing, that not everything you find in the dungeon is good or worth money. And there's lots of dangerous things. And, you know, it punishes players for doing dangerous things, right? So one of our, general complaints about 5th edition is that it's, too hard to punish people for doing reckless stuff. Well, here's punishment for doing something reckless.
Yep.
You picked up a creepy doll that you found in a dungeon while you're being chased by a giant amoeba.
I'm fine with punishing effects. It's just like, I don't know if I'm on board with like me as a person being affected, like, oh, I can't remember the name of someone, or like you changing my choices.
Yeah, but I mean, I think with the remembering, it depends how you do the ruling. Like with the remembering of names, I'd probably not do it retroactively, right? I would do it from the point where you got that curse. The worst part is you don't know that you have that curse.
Yep.
That is where I have more of the issue with, is that you don't know. Like, you'd have to make it that you know the consequences. Like, you should know what happened to you when you got cursed, right? Like, could you imagine if you didn't, or your DM didn't let you know, right? Like, I attack, and he's like, you can't. I attack, no, you can't.
Yeah.
You don't have permission to attack. Like that would be a super dickish way to run it. Like, I think if you're cursing somebody with something like this, you have to let them know, right? And with something like the forgetting of the names, you just let the player know that until you're uncursed, you can't forget any names of NPCs or whatever that you learn. So you just start keeping a list. It's irritating.
Yeah.
But in a perfect world, I'd hope that my players would remember the key names of NPCs all the time.
Well, you'd think, right? But
they don't.
Not often the case.
That's true. Anyways, I get what you're saying, because it's more punitive to the player than it is to the character. And I definitely can see that being problematic, especially the one that takes away players' agency.
Yeah. But, maybe I would enjoy it. I don't know. Like, I've never tried playing with something like that. So it could be fun in the end.
Also, the first one is the least worse, right? So if you pick up one and you get cursed, and then you pick up another one, like
Yeah.
I'm okay with.
But maybe they're super valuable, and you just like let one person grab all the things. But at what point is it bad? Like, I try to run away from the creature. Oh, you can't.
Well, this is why you have hirelings.
Yeah. You just bring other people into the pit with you.
you bring the guy that you're paying 1 silver piece a week to carry your stuff, and you just have your hireling pick up all the things.
Maybe that's the choice. So I think like the cool thing about this adventure though is not the actual creature following you and the mechanic that allows that to happen, but all the neat things that you can find inside of this old.
Oh, it's basically an oubliette for terrifyingly dangerous magical items.
Yep.
And that's where most of the fun is. And I'm not even going to try to go through all of them because there's literally dozens of odd and potentially dangerous things in here. So I think it's mostly about talking about selective weirdness.
Yep.
I will say that a portion of them are not part of the main dungeon, right? And in part of the dungeon, the PCs will find that there's been an earthquake at some point since the building of it. There's this big fissure that separates the two sides of it. They have to find a way to cross it. And on the far side, that's where most of the goodies are, right? So this is totally optional. The PCs can avoid the whole area and get out and miss most of the selected weirdness.
Yep.
I will say one thing I liked about the fissure is that the bottom of which is covered in baby gods, if you will, mini gods.
Right.
It's a bunch of tiny little amoebas.
Yeah, that's right.
From previously failed experiments. So if someone falls down the crevasse, they're like just swarmed
by mini gods.
The other thing I did kind of like about it was that if the PCs are being chased by the god and they get across the fissure, it doesn't follow. It will stay there for 4 days waiting for them to come back, but it is a safe, quote unquote, recoup area. But I mean, basically as designed, the PCs are going to scramble about trying not to die, looking for the way out. And there's some hints, right? There's some clues left by previously killed NPCs effectively that can give them guidance on how to get out of there. But as they go room to room, there's some bizarrely awesome things. Maybe we'll take turns going back and forth, sharing highlights.
One of the things that I thought was cool was the axle that you could find. So there's this hellish axle of a cart, and I guess if you could imagine
it's a chariot axle.
Well, but if you could get this thing out of this cave and put it on an actual chariot, you go on this magical hellish ride that you go dozens and hundreds of miles.
You're super fast.
So it's like, but the fabric of reality kind of gets shed away the longer you spend each turn on this, and it can summon demons in to attack you.
It's the chariot of unreality.
Right. So all these effects happen as long as you're going. And if you manage to not get bucked off by this thing on like some random portion, make it to the end, your soul is gone into...
There's a chance.
But this is the gist of it, right? So this is another part, like maybe it would be cool... maybe it wouldn't be cool.
I did like the general design of it. I like that you pick up interdimensional travelers because you're breaking down the fabric of reality in your chariot, and all of a sudden, like, there's a demon. Water elemental sitting beside you going like, what just happened?
Yeah.
And they don't have to, by nature, be hostile or anything like that. I also like the fact that your horses and the wooden components of the chariot always burn.
Yeah.
So all that's left after your ride is
just the axle. Yeah. So like and now this is another mechanic in it. Like maybe it would be neat. I don't know. But like if you somehow stay on the chariot to the end and your soul ends up being devoured by the chariot,
you're lost in time and space.
So the DM
it only happens if you take 8 points of damage. Like there's a specific amount of damage you need to take for this to trigger.
And what's supposed to happen is the DM makes little envelopes with his postal address on it and goes and drops them out in places around the world. And if some nice person out there sees it and mails it, and you're character sheet ends up making it back to the DM, your soul's found and you can come and play your character again. Like, kind of funny, I guess, neat. I don't know. It just seems like a lot.
I would never actually do that as a DM, but I do think it's kind of an interesting idea to represent that you may return from being lost in time and space, for lack of a better description. But yeah, I'm not going to go out to a bus stop and leave an envelope to say, you know, mail this back for a reward or whatever. Like, no. But yeah, it's an interesting concept, but I would never actually
put your address on random things and throw them out there.
No.
I think you liked the frog in the jar.
Oh, I liked a bajillion things. But I want to talk about the book first.
The poison book?
No. It doesn't even have a real name. It's just the book.
Oh, tell me.
So there's, in one of the rooms, you come across a couple of books. So there's a book cover that's had the pages removed. And then there's a book beside it that's describing the disassembled book.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
But the one that's describing, the one that actually has material in it, is fragmentary, and you can't really understand what it says when you read it. So you get the impression that there's this book that's incredibly powerful and, you know, the most powerful book on the planet kind of idea. And in reading it, you can't figure out if the intention is that the book must never be reassembled or that the book must be reassembled. So it's ambiguous. You're just like, I don't know. You get the cover to this book, and then you don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. And the book, there's 16 pages to the book. Okay. And in the dungeon, I can't remember if I wrote it down, but there's 4 pages maybe that can be recovered in this particular dungeon itself. And the book itself works on the basic level as a spell book. So each of the cover pages has X number of spells on it, and it's awesome for a wizard, right? Mm-hmm. Getting a couple pages in it, it's amazing. But as the book gets reassembled, it gains in power. And effectively, the book serves almost as like an elder god, you know, like Cthulhu in book form. And as it gets reassembled, it gains more influence over the universe. So I can't remember all the breakpoints, but basically, as it gets reassembled, it gains power to affect all mention self, and it starts to mess with information. Mm-hmm. So I can't remember what the cut points are. I don't think any of this happens specifically when you have 4 pages or whatever, but it gets to the point where like all books become gibberish. Like the information no longer exists in the written form is one of the first things that happens. And then it starts to mess with information at the genetic level. So all babies are born like horrific monstrosities. So due to genetic mutations. And as it gains more and more pages, all maps change to only point towards where other missing pages of the book are. Mm-hmm. And, I thought it was hilarious. And then if it ever becomes completely reassembled, it ends all universes. Like it just completely destroys the fabric of space-time itself, and existence winks out. All that is left is the book. And what I liked about it is it's thematically awesome. And it reminded me of, there's a 3rd edition source book that's on elder gods and using elder gods in your campaign. And the idea with that is, you know, as the end times come, there's increases in potence and portent, and effects on the world, right? So the skies go dark and rivers run red and et cetera, et cetera. And that reminded me a lot of that. And I thought the book as an item itself, maybe not necessarily even used in this adventure, is kind of an awesome campaign arc, right? Whether the PCs have it and start assembling it, not knowing what it is, or the enemy, has this and is assembling it. You could have a whole campaign where you're basically trying to prevent the assembly of this book,
or inadvertently cause,
or you can start one way and end the other way, right? You could start like the first half of your campaign could be your wizard finding this book and be like, dudes, we have to, this is awesome, right? And then you start to notice things are bad, and then the book gets stolen from you by somebody that has some other pages, and then you spend the other half trying to stop the assembly. You can have as many factions as you want. I was reading this, and thematically, I was like, seems like a cool magic item that you could build an entire campaign,
especially if someone had a thirst for knowledge and books.
Yeah. So it's just a neat magic item, and whatever, you say about the other things in here, that as an idea is worth the price of admission, I thought. Like, I was like, as a takeaway, even if I never run this adventure, I'm like, that is a neat way of handling an apocalypse.
Yeah.
Built with the reassembling of an item, and the fact that it's just a book makes it seem super benign.
Sort of like a reverse deck of many things, where it's like assembling the things just has an effect at some point. Yeah, not so random. Yeah.
I thought that was neat.
Pretty cool.
You got something?
I did like the book written on deadliest poisons.
Oh, yes.
That is just like a book that, detailed all the deadliest poisons in the world. But if you read it for an hour, you just died.
Yeah.
I thought that was neat. And,
I thought that was great.
Yeah.
Randomly, I love that there's a piece of paper stuffed in the wall that sounds like the African plains.
Oh, yeah.
That's it. Like, it doesn't do anything else. It's just a piece of paper that, you hear this weird noise in the wall and you pull it out and it's just elephants trumpeting and like... Exactly. The theme to The Lion King starts playing, and all it is basically a lure for the god, right? Like, you pull it out and suddenly it sounds like you're in a herd of animals and I just thought that was just weird, like the right type of weird to me. It's not punishing. It's not like those statues with the curses.
Yeah.
It was just flavorful in my kind of weird way.
I can't remember how it exactly works now, but I've written down the excrement of the Minotaur. I think you turn into a Minotaur.
It's feces and it's urine, and it gives you powers when you rub it all over your body. What I liked about that was that it said there's a chance when you use it, you turn into a Minotaur.
Yeah.
And it was like, that's bad. But on the plus side, you can refill the jars.
Yeah.
Which I liked. The pin. I don't know if it had a different name, but there was a pin in a box that if you prick yourself with it, you start to grow a growth on your body that can be cut off. And if you don't cut it off, it eventually detaches and has a mouth. And it's a little like four-legged murder machine growth that's under your control. So you can just be like, attack, and it goes and attack. You make yourself like this little
teratoma, just a
little dog-sized tumor that goes around and attacks. I thought it was hilarious. I refer to it as a personal murder monster.
Personal murder monster.
There's a bunch of books in there that were super interesting. There's a book that if you read, every time you go through a door, it's a 1% chance that it opens up into another dimension and you're lost in time and space. Like, literally, you just read this book and then there's always a chance that your adventuring life could end from opening a random book, which I thought was funny. Anything else? I got a couple other ones.
Keep going. I've got the frog in the jar written down.
Okay, I'll leave that one to you because I have a couple other ones. Another book was We Are the Lost, which I thought was just, again, a really cool magic item. So it's a book that when you read it, it's about a meditation technique that's designed to allow you to travel from point A to point B without having anything hamper your progress. So you learn the technique from reading the book. And then when you do it, the party says, okay, we're all going to travel from wherever to wherever, it doesn't matter, right? Town to town. So you do your meditation and you start doing it. And then when you sort of open your eyes, you are where you're in point B, right? You do it in point A, you seemingly instantaneously, but you notice that a random amount of your hit points are missing, a random amount of your food is missing, a random amount of your equipment's damaged. And it turns out that, and I can't remember, like, and then a random amount of time has passed. And it's always longer amount of time than it would have taken to go normally. So effectively, you just got through a giant adventure, that you don't remember. And it happens in another plane of existence because nobody remembers you arriving or leaving. So once again, like, it's very Cthulhu-esque in its themes. But I like that just as a flavor item. Your players would use it once. They'd never use it again. And I think it's just kind of a funny, non-punitive item. Some of the other stuff was kind of dark. There's the blood diamond, that every time you sacrifice a person to the diamond, it gets worth more. It increases by value by 100 gold pieces. Each in the hands of the wrong party, that would just be game breaking, because they just sacrifice every person they take alive. It's a bandit. He's worth 100 gold now. Like, literally every prisoner that you get from that point on
is worth 100
is worth 100 gold until you sell the blood diamond. There was also the Curse of Blood book, where you could gain special permanent abilities based off of what family member you sacrificed in a ritual. And it literally lines out, like, if it's a cousin, this happens. If it's your brother, this happens. And I'm like, oh, it's dark, but it's supposed to be dark. I got two more, but let's do the...
I don't remember the frog in
okay.
its entirety, because I think I was upset with this adventure after, like, breaking into the real world.
The frog, once again, like, this is only a fraction of there's like 30, there's like things. 30 rooms or something, like, each containing one of these weird treasures. The frog is like a pickled frog in a jar, and it speaks telepathically to whoever holds it. Will answer one question, any question. Will answer it truthfully.
Right.
And when it does, it dissolves in the jar into the person's mind and makes them look more amphibian-esque for permanently.
And you can put a new frog in the jar and do it all over again.
All over again. Like, it's a renewable resource. Anything else interesting? Oh, there's a ring. It's a cursed ring that you open up this container, and there's a ring on a finger bone. And then it's some warning about this being super powerful, but is it worth the cost? So you put it on, and it's a bonus to your AC, like a super good one. It depends on the type of game you're running. You can just make it super awesome. But the curse is that you no longer gain sustenance from food. So it doesn't matter how much food you eat, you will starve to death. So you get this awesome AC bonus, but the only way to remove the curse is to cut off the finger that the ring was on. And I'm just like, that is situationally awesome. And I can think of PCs that would be like,
I have
10 fingers. How many do I really need? Because sometimes it might be worth it. You just be like, it'll take me like a month to starve, so.
Well, it'd only be a couple of days because you couldn't drink water either.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know if it was it says sustenance from food. I don't know if water would be part of it.
Per challenge, is it worth putting the ring on?
Well, if you're high enough level, you regenerate your finger.
Well, someone's gonna
get a ring of regeneration and the cursed ring, and then boom, it's just Invincible. Like an awesomest AC bonus. There's others, but those were just some of the neater things. There's lots of cool items in here that if your PCs accumulated them, like, because theoretically this could be first level PCs in here coming out with a ton of cursed and otherwise loot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things I kind of did like about it, is because there's so many weird and neat things, this would basically serve as the beginning of a whole campaign, right? Because you'd be releasing all of these weird and powerful items back into the general world.
Yeah.
And from that, you could have all different types of complications and whatnot. Also, some of them are just neat, and I may just steal them.
I like the idea of loot not being good too all the time, you know? Like, yeah, you're going to find things that are evil or bad or don't do anything useful, but like have a cool effect or they're fun, you know? Like the frog thing, no real implications, but like you can get some information and become a little more amphibious. It's just fun, you know?
It's neat thematically and makes magic to be not as good, you know? Like that's one thing that's sort of interesting about D&D versus some other settings is magic is more often portrayed as sort of a useful tool, whereas in something like Conan, magic is always not good. Like there's a certain corrupting aspect of magic, and you lose some of your humanity in becoming a magic user. And I think in Lamentations, it's more that type of thing, that like magic items can be super awesome, but magic in and of itself isn't necessarily always good. And the idea that there's costs to magic. So I'd like to see more of that cost aspect of it. You know, like, yes, you can use this awesome sword, but you need to feed it blood.
Yeah.
You know, or some other trade-off that you need to have, you know. It ages you abnormally quickly.
Right.
Right. There's that sort of cost associated with using this awesome item of power versus just like, hey, you know, I slept with it. We're tuned. We're like this now.
Yeah.
You know, like we're best buds. You know, that idea that magic is dangerous.
Yeah.
I guess is part of the point I'm making, is that there's not enough sometimes that in D&D in particular, that magic is dangerous. And because there's so many ways of determining if a cursed item is a cursed item, these days, you know, ever since detect magic and identify became a thing, magic, you know, cursed items aren't nearly as scary as it used to be when you just like, how do I figure it out? Well, start using it and see what happens, right?
Yeah.
Like, so having weird magic items like this, and especially like tomes, I like the idea that there's consequences to gaining access to forbidden knowledge, if you will.
Yeah, and these things were lost for a reason, right? They're not out there.
Well, exactly. This isn't even lost. They were put away and archived because they weren't safe to be out there in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of, again, an interesting theme to include in your adventures, is that sometimes they were sealed away for a reason.
Yeah.
Right? You're not recovering lost knowledge that was lost. You're recovering forbidden knowledge that was sealed away. And I think that more adventures would benefit with having that in it a little bit more, like that sort of danger aspect to releasing things that were better left alone.
Right. Yeah.
I think I can leave it on sort of that comment.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's really about it. Sort of for final thoughts, I like the magic items in it more than I like the adventure itself, I would say.
I agree.
I think it would be very difficult to run regardless of what edition it is, because it is just a lot of running around.
Yeah.
And in 5th edition in particular, as we've mentioned in previous discussions, that adventures that are based on attrition don't work as well, because it's more user-friendly or safer, if you will.
Yep.
But in terms of converting this to 5th edition, super easy, right? First edition to 5th edition's a couple of tweaks. It's not really a thing whatsoever. But as I mentioned previously, and to sort of end on, I think something like this as a starter adventure to get things going is super cool, in that it could set the tone and provide hooks for basically an entire adventuring career with all these cool items, and having a campaign built around magic items could be super fun.
Yeah. I wasn't a huge fan, but after talking to you about it for an hour, I agree with like what you're saying. Finding those cool, powerful items at such a low level and having a link to something else later on could be fun. I don't know if I'm a fan of like the noise and following mechanic, like the chase and run mechanic. I
don't know if that would be fun.
But
actually,
you know, like
it
would just be a nuisance because once you find one cool thing, they're going to want to keep finding other cool things and just keep going, and then you're just tracking something that's sort of at the end of the day. Or why hasn't it eaten all these magical items? Because that's what it likes to do.
Well, some of them you can't get access to, right? Like most of them are on the other side. But anyways, I think we're just going to start repeating ourselves, so we can stop there.
Thanks for listening, guys. Next week we are jumping over to the Tomb of Horrors.
Tomb of Horrors, yes, the classic.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.